Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the big matchup coming up here in the Big 12 in Week 5 of this 2022 college football season. And it's compared to the Oklahoma State Cowboys and the Baylor Bears. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 5. It's a rematch of last year's Big 12 title game when Baylor literally won the game by inches. And so it's definitely going to be a very intriguing matchup for that reason. Plus, it's going to have some long-term Big 12 implications as you got two teams here that are at the top of the Big 12. So definitely a very interesting and crucial match for both these teams coming up here in Week 5. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting with your team trends. Oklahoma State beat UAPB in their Week 3 matchup 63-7. Took care of them pretty easily. And Oklahoma State is 3-0 to start off the season. They had a bye week last week, so a pretty early bye for Oklahoma State, but that could help them in this matchup being rested up, plus more time to prepare for this matchup. And they're ranked 9th in the nation right now. And as for Baylor, they beat Iowa State on the road 31-24. Good win for the Bears, and they're 3-1 to start off the season. Of course, they lost in Week 2 at BYU in double overtime. So that was a tough loss there for Baylor. Very tightly contested matchup, but in the end they took the loss. And so they're ranked 16th in the nation, so they're a bit behind Oklahoma State there. But honestly, you can't count out either of these teams yet in this season, that's for sure. I mean, both teams, Baylor's 1-0 in conference play, of course, beating Iowa State. Oklahoma State, this is their first conference game of the season. So, a lot of things can happen for both these teams, and both teams are very much potential contenders for the college football playoffs. So that's also why this is a crucial matchup, is because, the loser of this game is going to have a much tougher road in getting to the college football playoff. Games be on Saturday, October 1st in Waco, Texas. So Baylor's the home team for this one. Spread's going Baylor by 2.5, and your over-under is 54.5. So Baylor is slightly favored in this matchup. 2.5, that's a pretty tight spread, which is expected. This is going to be a pretty close matchup, I do expect, between these two teams. FPI is going Baylor 65.3%, so FPI is going slightly heavier on the Baylor side, and over-under being 54.5. More of a moderate scoring game can be expected here. Series history, Oklahoma State leads at 22-19, but Baylor, of course, won the last matchup, which was in the Big 12 championship game last season, and Baylor has also won 6 of the past 10. So it's been a pretty split series between these two teams. Both teams have won against each other and have gone back and forth multiple times in the past 10 matchups. Here's your stat comparison. Oklahoma State, 51 points per game so far this season, 22 points allowed. They got 348 passers a game, 163 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 265 passing, 111 for rushing. So, defensively, Oklahoma State at times has been a bit inconsistent. They have improved, though, I will say. If you look at their Week 1 matchup against Central Michigan, they allowed 44 points in that matchup to Central Michigan, which is definitely not a good thing. You don't want to be allowing 44 points like that to a non-conference opponent that you should be shutting down pretty easily. But they allowed 17 against Arizona State. The Sun Devils' offense is pretty terrible, though, and of course allowed 7 against UAPB. Then again, they're an FCS opponent. So, but this is really where we're going to find out whether or not Oklahoma State's defense is for real and whether or not Oklahoma State can be a contender with it. Because you're going up against a Baylor team. This is the best offense that Oklahoma State has faced to this point by far. Arizona State is they're probably the best team that Oklahoma State has played so far this season, and Arizona State is not very good. So, going up against Baylor, we're going to learn a lot about Oklahoma State and whether or not this team is a real contender. But offensively, this team has been really good in the passing game so far, average of 348 passers a game so far this season, which is outstanding. Then if you look at Baylor, 40 points per game, 16 points allowed, 224 passers a game, 206 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 225 passing, and then 79 for rushing. So statistically, Baylor has been better on defense, but Oklahoma State has put up more points this season. But also, Baylor's played a tougher schedule for sure so far this season in comparison to Oklahoma State. Baylor played at BYU. They just played at Iowa State, who's a pretty good team. So Baylor's played tougher opponents, and overall they've fared decently well. Of course, it still is disappointing for them to take that loss in Week 2 to BYU. But, this has been an offense that's been pretty balanced. They got a pretty good rushing game with Richard Reese being the top rusher in there, over 300 yards, 6 touchdowns so far this season. Of course, you got Blake Shapen, who is still a younger quarterback, but he's played pretty well so far this season. with over 700 yards, nearly 800, 7 touchdowns. Does have a pick, but that's not terrible through 4 games. And of course, if you compare that with Spencer Sanders, the Oklahoma State quarterback, he's got 10 touchdowns, over 1 interception, and nearly 1,000 yards of offense so far this season. And if you look at Baylor's defense, they have been better in the rushing defense so far this season. They have allowed 225 average pass yards a game so far this season, which isn't terrible, but also isn't great. So Oklahoma State is, considering they're pretty good in the passing game, that's something to keep an eye on there. And Oklahoma State, of course, defensively just hasn't been great. Of course, Baylor's a pretty balanced offense. They can beat you in the rushing game and in the passing game, so that's something to keep an eye on. Recent matchups: Oklahoma State beat UAPB, beat Arizona State, and beat Central Michigan so far this season. Of course, the most notable one there is that Central Michigan game, 58-44. High-scoring shootout. Of course, Oklahoma State led most of that game, but they still allowed 44 points there. And for Baylor, beat Iowa State 31-24, beat Texas State 42-7, lost to BYU in double overtime, and beat UAlbany in week 1, 69-10. Some key points for this one: Oklahoma State 3-0. Of course, for both these teams, it's a rematch of last year's Big 12 title game and what was a pretty thrilling matchup. I mean, Baylor winning that game at the end, I can guarantee you Oklahoma State does not forget how that game ended, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder because of that. I mean, Oklahoma State is going to be out to get revenge for what happened in the later stages of that game. And so Oklahoma State, they're going to be ready to go in this matchup. There's no doubt they've got 2 weeks to prepare for it. They had a bye week last week, so they're rested up. They've once again got plenty of time to prepare for it. So Oklahoma State, this is a team that is going to be out to definitely, I mean, this is, I can guarantee you, a game that is really, it's circled on the calendars of Oklahoma State, that's for sure. They've been excellent in the passing game so far this season. Spencer Sanders at quarterback, that's something to keep an eye on. They got a few good receivers, of course. Brandon Johnson is definitely got to keep an eye on as well. And as for Baylor, coming off of an impressive win over Iowa State, Blake Shapen showing plenty of upside as well. I mean, this is really the game where both teams can prove themselves to be contenders or not. I mean, Baylor 3-1 coming off of a good win on the road in Ames last week. I mean, this is a really crucial one, especially for Baylor if they want any chance of being in the college football playoff this season. Of course, they've already taken 1 loss. So, I mean, taking a second loss this early on could be very detrimental to Baylor's chances of being a national contender, which I feel the Bears very much could be. Even for Oklahoma State here, I mean, Oklahoma State is very much in that conversation right now, but they need to prove themselves, and they really haven't done that yet this season. So this is the first opportunity for them to really do that. And of course, for Baylor, strong rush defense and rushing core, there's no doubt. Really good rushing offense, and their rush defense has been impressive so far this season. Definitely something to keep in mind. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Oklahoma State and Baylor, the big matchup coming up here in the Big 12 this upcoming weekend. And I'm going to go Oklahoma State here. 31-27 is my predicted final score. This is as close as it gets to predicting a game here. You got 2 teams that are extremely talented, very much on the even playing field as well. But I think Oklahoma State, they got a chip on their shoulder coming into this matchup. I mean, I think that's going to give them that's going to give them an edge on Baylor, I think. I mean, Baylor's going to be ready to go. Of course, they don't want to take another loss, especially after that brutal loss to BYU back in week 2. But in the end, I also really like Oklahoma State's passing game. Spencer Sanders, this offense is pretty good in the passing area, and going up against a Baylor defense that hasn't been quite as good in the secondary, I do think Oklahoma State takes advantage of that. And I definitely think for Oklahoma State here, they got to be better on defense. That's going to be crucial as well. I mean, you can't be allowing 44 points like this team did against Central Michigan a few weeks back and expect to win this game. I mean, it's just not going to work that way. So for Oklahoma State, got to be better on defense. I think they do so here. They still allow 27, but in the end, a win is a win, and Oklahoma State gets it done. But once again, it's going to be very close. I'm going to say Oklahoma State 51%. So once again, just about as close as a coin toss as you can get, over under 54.5. I'll take the over for this one, Oklahoma State to cover the spread in the end, which is currently 2.5 points towards Baylor. And of course, if you're going to take the over in this matchup, I honestly think it doesn't really matter which team you predict to win here. I think it's pretty comfortable taking the over for this one. But anyway, that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.